How to submit a data set using WQX Web? Well, as Charles was speaking about earlier, the goal of next week is to submit your projects, to submit your monitoring locations, and then to eventually then submit your activities and results. Basically, the meat and potatoes of your data, result values and units and such. But what is great about WQX Web is importing those three types of data is exactly the same, being the process. The process is similar, if not the same exact steps for each data set. So we're going to go through all three types of data, starting with the two metadata elements being projects and then monitoring locations. And then finally we'll do a couple different scenarios of activities and results and show you how to validate errors that exist within your data set. So the first type of data we are going to import submit, I should say, is projects. So I'm just going to get out of this presentation really quickly, and here is the login page for CDX. This is where every one of you will go to log into WQX Web. You'll have your CDX login like I do, and I like to have my browser save my password. So I'm logging in here, and you'll see that there's an additional step to get to WQX Web. And I also have a password that's expiring soon, but I'll deal with that later. But here is the WQX Web service. I'm going to click on that. It's going to give me an application loading sign. And here we are, WQX Web. Now, if you remember from our overview last week, this should seem fairly familiar. If you have not logged into WQX Web, or you have just to say that you have, I really encourage you to click around on these links in the left-hand menu and just explore and get familiar with the layout. That goes a long way in terms of submitting your data. Okay, so I'm in WQX Web. I'm starting fresh, right? I'm starting brand new. I don't have anything in WQX Web, WQX, but I want to start submitting data. So where do I start? And this is where I bring up this example data set that I built. So you'll see that this is the exact same column format that we worked on last week, and it is going to utilize the same import configuration that we built during last week's presentation. And if you are confused on what an import configuration is, I encourage you to review that recording that Charles posted a couple days ago. It'll be really helpful because we're not going to go into depth about import configurations. This is just purely getting your data that's already mapped into WQX. So we're starting with projects. And you can see, let me just back up a little bit. So this is how I decided to organize my data. I wanted one master Excel file. I wanted to have my activities and results in one tab. You'll see that I have two different examples, so kind of disregard that. But imagine for example purposes that I just have my activities and results in this page, and you can see it's all nice and laid out. Looks like a great format. Everything is there that's required. I have my monitoring locations tab, and that's really cool too. This is kind of a centralized Excel form that has all of my metadata and my activities and results in one area. And then finally, I have my projects, or in this case, a project. And this is where we're going to start. So we don't have anything in WQX, and we want to start getting this metadata together. Now, why do we want to start in projects and monitoring locations first? Well, that's because if we just go ahead and import activities and results, WQX is not going to recognize any of the monitoring locations we're adding, and it's also not going to recognize the project because they just don't exist. So we want to get that data in, so that way while we are importing or submitting this data set to WQX via WQX Web, it is able to reference these monitoring locations and this project successfully. So that's why we're starting with projects. Now, how do I get this into WQX? Well, if you remember, it all starts with an import configuration. And you'll see that I have built a number of import configurations for this example. And here is our project-specific import configuration. Now, this import configuration matches this data set right here. So what's my next step? Well, unfortunately, as of right now, WQX Web does not import a .xlsx file extension. And let me show you what that means. So if you go to, whenever you're ready to import a file such as this into WQX Web, we are going to create a new data set, obvious enough, and you'll do that by clicking on this link right here, the second one down. And you get to the Create New Data Set page, and it's basically saying, okay, you want to create a new data set. So what kind of data do you want to add to WQX? And in this case, we want to add or import a file of projects. Because as you know, we already have an import configuration that matches our data set. So I'm going to click on that file of projects. Let's go ahead and choose our import configuration. And this is going to be the New Jersey presentation projects. Okay, so here's the page where we will upload our file that we want to load, and then also, set the existing parameters, or is this new data? Are we updating records? Are we adding new records? Is it a kind of a combination of the two? But also, the generated values needs to be populated. You can see here we have not defaulted our organization ID. And that's something that you'll probably do within your import configuration. So I'm going to quickly default this to WQX test. And everyone has access to the WQX test organization. It's just an organization you can use to kind of throw any test data you can imagine into it. But okay, so we want to add this project, but it's in an Excel form. It's in a different tab. I need to get this in a format that is appropriate for WQX Web, and that is by a .csv or .txt file extension. And if I flip back to this page, you'll see that the delimiter is already set in this import configuration as a comma or .csv file extension. So let's go ahead and get this projects tab saved as such. So you just go to File, Save As. I'm just going to save it in the current folder, and I'm going to save it as a file as type CSV. As you see, it says comma delimited. I'm going to save it as New Jersey presentation projects, and then I'm going to save. Now it's going to complain and say, are you sure? It's going to say, are you really sure? So I say yes and yes. And now this is a CSV file. It's still showing the Excel tabs and sheets, and this is where Excel kind of have a gotcha moment. Be careful whenever you save a particular tab or file as a .csv or txt that you close out and don't do any further modification that you would like to expect in an Excel form, because you'll lose your formulas. So now we have the .csv format of our projects. We have chosen the correct import configuration. Now let's choose that file. You'll see that it pops up right in the correct folder because I've been working in it a little bit. And I'm going to select the New Jersey presentation projects.csv. I'm going to click Open. You'll see it has populated that field. Now attachments, again, this is an area where you can add supplemental documentation, whether it has to do with a project-specific form, a QAPP, any type of QA/QC measures, or anything related to that project specifically. You can choose to create an attachment that will be associated with that project. But we're not going to do that. It's not required. So we're just going to leave this as such. So moving down the generated values, you can see I defaulted it to our org WQX test. Of course, if this is your organization, this would have your organization ID within it. This is new data only. So I want to kind of clarify, even though technically the project is not literally new, we're talking in a sense of, is it new within WQX? So we have three options. This file contains new data only, this file contains existing data only, or this file may contain new and or existing data. Now, let me kind of put these into what I think of when I look at these tabs. This is data is not within WQX. The second one is all of the data I am importing is already imported into WQX and submitted. And then finally, this file has data that may or may not be in WQX. I'm not sure, so I'm going to select this just to be safe. These two are fairly important to recognize because if you are updating records, importing the same file to WQX Web, it's important to mark this second link as just like that, just by clicking on the different checkbox. But in this case, we have new data only, so that's all we're going to use it for. This is just new data only. If you have any questions about these three separate methods of importing, feel free to drop us an email or a phone call, or just shout out loud what you're thinking, and I'd be more than happy to further explain. But for all intents and purposes, all of these files contain new data because it is not currently in WQX. So, just to recap this page, we have chosen the correct import configuration. We have chosen the file that matches that import configuration. We have a file that matches the delimiter that was selected. Whoop, I just unselected that by accident. So we have chosen the correct file with the correct column delimiter. We are going to ignore the first row of the import file because, if you remember, we do have a column header row. We have our organization ID selected, and we recognize that this data is not yet in WQX, so we want to add it. So next step is to click Continue. It's going to say the first row will be ignored, just to remind you, and that's okay because we do have a header row. And now it is importing. So I see an error. Let's see what's going on here. Just going to wait for the page to refresh. Okay, so you see here in my testing of this project, I have already added it into the system. So this is what happens whenever I add a piece of data into WQX that is already existing in WQX. So it says Project ID Water Quality Study, or in this case WQ Study, has already been used in WQX, and this is not allowed when importing all new data. And again, this goes back to those three selection checkboxes. So let me quickly run through this and just go create new data set, import a file of projects, and I'm just going to choose the projects, import configuration. I'm going to choose the appropriate file. And rather than saying that this is all new data that does not exist in WQX, I'm just going to default this org quickly. And so rather than selecting that as new data, I'm going to go ahead and select this is existing data only. And let's see the difference in that import. And let me just click this refresh button. So you can see now that that error has gone away. So, but whenever you look at the bottom here, you see that the project, we have one project total. It is not an invalid project. It's also not new. It already exists. So that's okay. We have no errors. We have no warnings. So we consider that this record is properly updated in WQX. But we still have one step left, and that is to export and submit these files. So the last step is going to be to select this button. It's going to have kind of a area where you enter your personal information just to put a stamp on it to say who submitted this data. We want to export and submit to CDX. We'll click Continue. And now it is exporting. So while that completes, and it shouldn't take too long, are there any questions about this import process or how to add projects into WQX?